Welcome to the December 14th meeting of the British Empire Study Group. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you very much. You're in for a real treat. For those of you who are our regulars, I thank you very much. I know it's a very hectic time of the year, and I appreciate you taking, we all appreciate you taking your time out to see this program. So now, without any more discussion from me, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Rob Lutens, to introduce Charles Verge.
Thank you so much, Joan. Here are a few words about our presenter this evening, Charles J.G. Verge. Charles was president of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada from 2000 to 2007, president of the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors from 1998 to 2002, and is a past president of the Ayr Philatelic Society. His primary philatelic interests include managing the hobby, writing about it, and promoting it. He collects Haiti revenues, Canadian first day covers from the 1950s, dental first day covers and thematics, and English language machine cancels from Ireland prior to 1922. He's a national and international collector, accredited judge, philatelic journalist, author, and has represented Canada at many international philatelic gatherings. He was asked to sign the Roll of Distinguished Philatelists in 2020 and received the Liechtenstein Award in 2023. So, without further ado, I give you our esteemed presenter for this evening, Charles J.G. Verge.
Thank you very much, Rob and Joan. I'm very grateful for Joan having invited me to do this presentation, and particularly the way we met in Florida, where we ended up sitting together at a banquet and talked, and she came out and said, "Would you like to do this?" And I said yes, and so that was almost a year ago. So I'm very grateful to both of you for your introductions and for Joan inviting me. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is the English language machine cancels of Dublin, Ireland to 1922. As you will see in the presentation, it ends in 1922 when the machine dies, the date dies, are changed to the Gaelic language in Dublin, but they are progressively changed across the country as well. There are two periods of uses of the machines in Dublin, and they are from 1868 to 1887 and from 1902 to 1922. A few years after the introduction of uniform penny postage, hand canceling and hand stamping became a problem for larger post offices in the UK. Because of the enormous increase in items handled, the reduction of the postage rate made people write more and send more material out. Unless very carefully maintained, cleaned, and applied with an acquired skill, hand devices produce poor and sometimes illegible impressions. There was a shortage of competent staff. The working conditions were extremely cramped, and a constantly increasing volume of mail aggravated the problem. In 1853, the first Earl Canning, who was Postmaster General of the UK from 1853 to 1855, approached Pearson Hill, who had joined the post office in 1850, to devise, if possible, a reliable cancellation machine. As an interim step, they used duplex cancels, combining the date stamp and the obliterating device. And these were introduced between 1853 and 1854. Prior to that, there were two hand stamps, one for the date and one for the canceling. And now they had the duplex cancels, which allowed the cancelers to use only one hand stamp. So the first period of use is a Pearson Hill pivot machine, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. Although in the UK there were many trials and many machines used between the period of 1887 to 1906, none of those machines were operated in or were put in use in Ireland, and specifically not in Dublin either. The second period of use is 1906 to 1922, and some of these machines go past 1922, but they have the Irish language on them. Those are four machines: are the Columbia, the Crag, the Hay Dolphin, and the Universal, and we'll talk about those as well. Pearson Hill is the son of Sir Rowland Hill, who most of you probably know who he is, the inventor of the penny postage. And Pearson Hill started working on stamping machines in 1853 and introduced the first prototype machine in March of 1857. His work was interrupted several times during that period, but the production of a machine became critical when a trial judge at the famous Madeline Smith poisoning case in Scotland spoke critically of in his summing up of the after the case was finished, of the post office's responsibility for smudgy and illegible postmarks, where the date on the envelope was a crucial part of the evidence in this case. William Bokenham, the controller of the circulation department, felt that the prototype machine of March 1857 was promising enough to justify its production and the expense of making it. The machine was trialed with many duplex cancellers. There were different sizes, different shapes, different die boxes, different canceling lines used with the machine, just to try it out. And it was basically tried out between September and November 1857. After many semi-successful attempts by Pearson Hill, they were interrupted by others like Charles Rideout and his machines. Pearson Hill invented the parallel machine in 1858. 28 were purchased for use in London, and Pearson Hill recommended that they be used in the larger county offices. When they talk about county or provincial offices, the Brits in their literature mean England and Wales and Scotland. They do not include, England and Wales. They do not include Ireland and Scotland. They consider them as separate entities. He was given a grant of £1,500 for the use of his machines in 1867. The machine that's illustrated here is the first one produced and ordered by Bokenham. It is not the parallel or the Pearson Hill pivot. It resides in the British Post Office Museum. Pearson Hill pivot machine. It's a major improvement on the parallel machine, and it was very successful. It was introduced. The parallel machine was introduced. Sorry, the parallel machine was very successful. The Pearson Hill machine was introduced in 1867, and it was manufactured commercially by Messrs. Turner and Company from April 1867. It became part of the normal equipment of the larger offices in London and the provinces. Again, we're talking about the English counties. In Ireland, they were distributed to Belfast, Cork, Dublin, that had three different dies, as we will see. Kingston, which is now known as Dunleary, and Limerick. There were hundreds of machines manufactured, but for some unknown reason, none has survived, or at least none is recorded to have survived, and it can only be illustrated by a drawing. So the Pearson Hill machine drawing will show you that this is the table, the letter table, where the sorter is working, and this is the shelf above it, and there's a post to which the machine is attached with all of its movable parts. There's an ink reservoir up here and an ink pad here. So when the stamper moves the machine, it goes up to the ink pad and gets ink for, goes to the ink reservoir to get ink for the ink pad. And this is a conventional hand stamp that has been attached to the machine and has the two parts to it, the date die and the canceling device. The Pearson Hill machine was the date die and the numbered obliterator, which you see on the right, this one here, they were locked in a form. So they were put together. However, because they were two separate items, both parts being detachable, it's not surprising that the two separate parts sometimes mistakes in alignment happened. And this is most striking in the case of the one in Belfast, where the some of the date dies are completely 90 degrees in a different direction than what they should be. The machine, when we're talking about the Dublin, the diamond canceller, we're talking about numeral cancellers that the British Post Office decided to use in its different components, and it started by issuing the numeral cancellers by alphabetical order post offices with number 1 to whatever number at the end. And they had different shapes. So for Ireland, they were diamonds. For England, Wales, and London, they were either circles or ovals, barred circles or barred ovals. And we're talking bars, we're talking about these bars here. And for Scotland, they were a rectangle. Now, this is the earliest known or the earliest recorded use of the pivot machine in Dublin in November 17th, 1868. It was used, the machines were used until the late 1880s, and they're recognizable by two very striking features: the size and the look of the diamond, the 186 obliterator, and the screws holding the canceling device to the machine. So you've got these are the screws. Now, they're not always visible. So sometimes you can get a Pearson Hill pivot machine cancellation that doesn't show the screws. However, the diamond is very unusual, and we'll see a little better on the next slide. As you can see, the diamond is a very striking shape with the triangles at the bottom at the top. They are unlike any other diamond canceling device that was used in Ireland prior to the Pearson Hill pivot machine. So the marks of the screws, as I mentioned, are part of the cancellation, and there were two screws. There was one at the top left of between and the bottom right between the two, the date die and the canceling device. I said there were three dies and date dies in Dublin. So there was number 1, number 2, and number 3. And they were, 2 is the most common as far as I gather, and 3 is the rarest. Now, there is this other one that is 21, or 2I, and it's not quite clear what it is exactly, because you can find the I or the 1 under the B, so makes it look like 21, or you can find it where it is now under the L and the I of Dublin. There's a lot of things that need to be continually studied in the use of many of the canceling devices in Ireland, simply because there's not necessarily enough material to be very authoritative on exactly when they were used and what exactly they are. So between the Pearson Hill pivot and the Columbia machine, which arrived in 1906, none of the other machines trialed in London, such as the Azimar in 1868, the Hoster in 1882, the Etbridge in 1885, the Imperial Mail marking machine in 1895 as well. The Bickerdike, which many American and Canadian collectors will know from the flag cancel devices that Bickerdike produced for those two countries. The Boston in 1898, none of these made their way to Ireland, although they were used or trialed in London. So the Columbia Postal Supply Company of New York offered their electrically powered machine to the UK Post Office in 1901. The British had very long trial periods for most of these machines. They wanted to make sure that they were going to get the best for their money, and they wanted to make sure that the machines would work better than the ones that they're replacing. So the trials were made from 1901 to 1905, and again, they had different bar canceling date dies, and the trials were all held in the Eastern Central District office in London, which is one of the larger London offices. So when they were introduced in 1904, formally, there were 58 machines that were used in the UK from 1904 to 1918, 32 in London and 26 in other post offices. Belfast and Dublin were the only Irish offices they each had a single machine. The machine here is a previous model of the Columbia machine. It's a hand operated machine. It is not an electric powered machine. So the Columbia machines have a huge number of die boxes, different die boxes, where you will see a progression of change from bars and numbers and dates and to wavy lines. So in this first die box, which was introduced in 1906 and was used between June 10th, 1906 and June 20th, 1906, when you see a date in green, it means that it is the earliest or the latest, and it is in my collection. So this machine, this combination of the die box and the cancels had 7 lines with the number 1 in the middle of the canceling lines, and it had the time under the date in the die box. So you can barely see the 7th line up here, and this is basically because of the contents of this material in this envelope, which stopped about at the height of the 7th line. So it wasn't a strike. The strike wasn't as good as the other lines. There should be a fair number of these latest dates. I have 2 of them, June 20th, 06, simply because they were sent out by the Defense Department or the tax office, not quite sure which one, and many of them were returned, as you can see by this Dublin circular day stamp, with notations like dead, or moved, or doesn't live here, or many other, because the Irish were notoriously good at ignoring official correspondence, and particularly when they knew what it was, and particularly if it came from the military, they wanted to avoid conscription. So the number 1 in between the lines here is a mystery. It's not known why it's there or what it means. It is neither the number of the machine in an office or a maker's number, which some people think it is, simply because the same number appears over and over again from one office to another throughout the UK. And there's no in the official documentation about Columbia machines, there's no indication of what that number means. The second die box, as you can see, the time has gone above the date, and that is where it should reside. If for those first few weeks, it was probably in a mistake, but it still has the other features, the 7 lines, the number 1. The earliest known is June 21st, 1906. But the literature is a little vague about when the latest is. It's either some writers talk about October 1907, some of them talk about August 1907. The third die box, the lines above the date die, Dublin, and the date have been removed. The time is still in the middle of the box. The number 1 is still in the obliterating lines, and there are large letters in Dublin, the spelling of Dublin. The letters are themselves larger. Now, this is the earliest known is June 9th, which is in my collection as well, and latest is December 6, 1907. I just want to point out to this particular cover, as an aside, Robert Bell was the director of the Geological Survey of Canada, a fairly well-known person in Canada. He's on a staff, in fact. The letter was postage due 2 décimes, and that is 4 cents. And they used a pair or 2 set stamps because the 4-cent stamp, the 4-cent postage due in Canada was not issued till 1928. Just an aside. Nothing to do with Dublin councils. The fourth die box, the number 1 is in between the lines again. The letter A has been added at the bottom here. And it is known between January 22nd, 1908, which is the earliest known, and May 24th, 1908. This, by the way, is a cutout. It is not a full cover. This particular cancel with the letter A and the number 1 is not recorded in the general literature on the subject of machine cancels. The Columbia 5th and 6th die machines have the letter A, with the number 1 has now disappeared. The letter A and the letter A for the 6th die is underlined, underscored. The letter A, the normal letter A, was used in the years 1908, 1910, 1911, and 1913. Each of these die box had to be remade every year. The movable type was only the time and the date of the year, and the name of Dublin were there permanently in the machine. And the letter A underscored is known for 1909 to 1912, but we'll see a conundrum about that later on. So the 7th die box, is with the wavy lines, and the letter B beside the name Dublin. And it was reintroduced, the Columbia machine was reintroduced into Dublin for a very short period of time with that configuration, likely to distinguish it from the Belfast machine, which loses the letter A. Why? Unknown, because Belfast and Dublin don't spell the same way and are not close to each other. So why the need of A and B? And Dublin had already had this machine since 1913. So the earliest use, as you can see, is a very short use period of July 29th, 1919 to November 5th, 1919. The Columbia machine was also used for official paid. And again, I'll talk about the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th die boxes, but they weren't The first and second and third die box are unrecorded use with the machine and probably were never used. So paid official and prepaid bulk mail was for material that didn't require postage stamps. This is definitely an area in Ireland that requires a lot more study, simply because there's not enough material for that study. And until that kind of material is found more commonly, and to add to the knowledge base, it's going to be very difficult to be, certain about certain things. Like, I will tell you that the first, second, and third die box are recorded, and tomorrow somebody can come up with, say, yes, but I have one. So the fourth die box is recorded from August 3rd, 1906 to July 4th, 1914. And on occasion, that die box was used without the lines, the canceling lines. There was no need for the canceling lines because there was no postage stamp to cancel. So I'm presuming that this one is from the fourth die box. The fifth die box is recorded from January 1st, 1907 to September 25th, 1906. When I say recorded, that's what it's recorded in the literature. It is likely that the machine or the die box was used till the end of 1909, simply because of the way the dies were prepared with the constant year date and the constant town name, as well as, in this case, the constant word paid. This is a 6 die box, and it's unrecorded, but one strike is known, and this is the one here. It's simply, and it contradicts the previously known information that about the regular use of the machine, where the A was not underscored for 1911, which may also imply that that this die box was made separately from the one that was used for the regular mail. The 7 die box, the one with the wavy lines, was introduced for a temporary basis again in 1919, although some literature indicates that it may have been used earlier for a short period between January and July of 1914. It definitely was used after 1919, but not for a very long period either. But again, there's not enough material to prove all of these points. Prepaid mail is for bulk mail, where somebody would send out hundreds of letters and would, in the United States, for example, we have in Canada, we have pre-canceled stamps they sometimes used to do that. So the fifth die box was used for that purpose. You will see there's a very faint 1 penny here beside the word paid. So they exist in halfpenny and 1 penny, and the dates, you can see the dates of use. The 6th die box is only known on this one cover, which is the one with the A, and the 7th die box is not known or is unrecorded. The next machine was a Cragg machine. Now, it's commonly known machine across the world. It was invented by a young Norwegian engineer called Gustav Hansen. He was about 24 years old, 23, 24 years old at the time. And it's named after the manufacturer, a company called Niels A. Cragg of Christiania, Norway. And they were available at hand and electric. And so they were offered to the post office in the UK in 1905. And again, it had a trial phase until 1909. And the canceling belt on this machine had 2 die boxes and 2 canceling sections. So it was a continuous run of canceling devices. And you can see it on larger items, as you will see later. it has more than one. It has more than the two. It continuously spun around, I gather, to cancel material. They were used in 8 Irish post offices: Ballymena, Cork, Dublin, Galway, Kilkenny, Limerick, Londonderry, and Monaghan. The Craig machine, there were 2 Craig machines. There was a B machine and an A machine. The B machine was introduced first, and the Craig machine was not originally planned to be sent to Dublin, but it was added because of a huge Christmas mail increase in 1912. It has 5 wavy lines, as you can see, and the continuous die boxes, and again the 5 wavy lines over here. Earliest known use is November 21st and 1912, and latest is April 23rd, 1916. You'll see that date of April 23rd, 1916 come up several times, and I'll explain what that's all about later. The time slug is not on the envelope, as you can see, and they would remove the time slug around Christmas, simply because to expedite the processing of the mail, because it required that the machine had to be stopped every 15 minutes when they put a time slug in. So here you see one where there are many. You can see the continuous belt going, where there are 3 die boxes and 4 wavy lines. Now, this is an interesting factor here. It's official paid mail should have received a red official paid mail Craig machine, but it didn't. And I'm wondering whether it's because it already said official paid and they didn't need to use the machine, so they just put it through the regular machine, or because it is from a government department, income tax department. And so these are known use between January 2nd, 1915 and April 23rd, 1916, the A machine. And both, when I talk about the April 23rd date, as some of you know, there was a major rising in Ireland in 1916. And the Irish took over the General Post Office and destroyed it, basically, during that rising. And so the rising itself started on Monday, April 24th, which was Easter Monday, and it's called the Easter Rising. That's why it's called the Easter Rising. So the Craig machine for official paid, as I said, official paid mail was for government mail generally, and only the B machine was used. It didn't use the A machine for this purpose. And again, it is their known use between September 30th, 1914 and April 23rd, 1916, because again, because of the rising. So as this is a little out of the period in the sense it's not English and it's not 1922. It is 1922, but the Craig machines, just to tell their whole story, were destroyed after in the Easter Rising, but some of the parts of the machine were salvaged and used to repair other Craig machines. Because in November 1922, there was a civil war in Ireland, and one party to the civil war set fire to the Rotunda Rink post office, and on November 6, 1922, and that Rotunda Rink post office was where the sorting office of the Dublin sorting office was housed after the Easter Rebellion and the destruction of the GPO. By 1922, the GPO had not been rebuilt or completely reestablished. So they used part of this machine, the machines from the Easter Rising, and created a machine for Dublin for the Christmas season. And you can see that there's a missing date on the one of the dies. It's presumed, I presume, that they didn't have enough equipment or enough pieces to add the date. And interesting enough, this is 31st of December 1922, and this is 1st of January 1923. So they use the machine after Christmas because, as you can see, the time is included in the where Christmas they would have removed the time slug. Now the other question is whether that was the only time they had, because you have both envelopes, two different writers, two different destinations with the same machine, the same time, different dates. Who knows? So the third machine is the Hay Dolphin machine. They look very elemental, and they probably are. This is a hand-operated one. They trialed this machine several times in 15-year period from 1893 to 1908, and the British officials were not convinced at all. But in 1911, the Hay Dolphin Company produced an improved machine called the Flyer, which was trialed but not purchased until 1915. Again, this long period of trialing that the British put their machines through. So 5 machines were purchased and distributed to Belfast, Birmingham, Lincoln, Rochdale, and Wallasey. Birmingham and Wallasey will become important in a few slides. In fact, it's now become important. When they lost the Craig machines in the Easter Rising, the Hay Dolphin machines from Wallasey and Birmingham were moved to Dublin. And the Wallasey machine became the Dublin B Hay Dolphin machine. I looked out to find this Wallasey strike. This Wallasey is a very small place, near outside of Liverpool on the ocean between Ireland and Wales. So the B machine for 1916 had the letter B beside the word Dublin, and from 1917 on, it had the letter B by the year date. And so I'm presuming that this B machine with the letter B after Dublin was used only in 1916 because the Dublin D, beside the date, that the year date starts in January and 1917 and goes through 1920. Again, like the previous machine, this type, Dublin 1917 and B, were constant. The only movable type was the date and the time. So the A machine, the one that came from Birmingham, went into use in 1917, and the earliest known use is July 13th, and the latest known use is May 12th, 1922. And the May 12th, 22 will be shown in a later slide because it is important to the change of English to Irish. There's a die box error, not an important one, where the time was put over the date, where normally the date was above the time. Now, Hay Dolphin also was used for official paid machines. As you can see, it's a very different look to the box. By that time, Post Office was very clearly had in mind that they really didn't need to to have canceling bars for official because there was no stamps to cancel. So these are very unique dies, and they had to be fabricated every year because the Dublin A and official paid and the 1918 or 1917 were made as a slug, and the time and the date were movable type again. And again, this is the Christmas season, so there is no time zone, no time slug. Earliest known use between July 1917 and February 14, 1922. Now, only the A machine was used, not the B. And they were both destroyed. The machines were both destroyed in the fire at the Rotunda in December 6, 1922, during the Civil War. It was also used for Dublin A machine was also used for prepaid mail, and this time it came in halfpenny, 1 penny, penny, halfpenny, and 2 pennies, and you can see the dates of use. There are two here that have only one date because there's only one copy known of each, and there's no early or late date. It's just that's what it is, and just proves again the point that we need to have more material to do to complete the study. So the values were interchangeable. The rest of the box, except the time and the date, was fixed. The value could be changed, and it was put into a circle. And there is a London use of this machine where you can see the circles without the value date on it. So those were prove the point that these were movable, and they were put into a circular window. The last machine, the last English language machine used in Ireland was the Universal machine. It was again another US company, the same company that owned Universal. Sorry, the Reno Neopost owned Universal and already had bought the rights to the Crag machine and the Hey Dolphin machines. So it was kind of a monopoly. So it offered the Universal machine to the post office in 1910. And although were introduced in Great Britain earlier, they weren't introduced to Dublin and Ireland until 1919 and were used in Belfast, Cork, Dublin, and Limerick. Universal had a very short life in the English language version, and there were continuing issues with its canceling bars. The machine was configured with 7 bars and was first introduced in Dublin with 6 bars here. And again, it's a very short period from March 12, 1920 to April 3rd, 1920. They went to 7 bar. They went back to this original configuration of 7 bars, and it is said that it was used March 12th to 20th, 1920, but I have never seen an example of that. It was then used between May 14th and June 9th, 1920. Which is the latest use of it. As you can see, it didn't cancel the stamps, so they used a Dublin double bar canceller hand stamp to cancel the stamp. The whole period between the introduction of the Universal machine until September 1920 was a 6 to 7 bar swing period. And you never, again, not enough material that has been saved or has been made available to study to find out if we can define exactly each of the periods where the 6 and 7 bars were used. In September 1920, the bar was broken, as you can see at the top here. And it was ascribed, or it is ascribed by writers on the subject, particularly the British writers, to the inferior quality of material that was used to make the bars and the heavy wear. It was the bar was not removed; it was kept on the machine and in Dublin and used between September 9th and November 2nd, 1920. And then there's the history of the 5, 6, and 7 bars. And the machine from November 17th, they removed the bar, the 7th bar, and was used with 6 bars. And then in February 25th, 1921, it reacquired its 7th bar. But by April 26, 1921, it only had 5 bars, and it remained that way all the way to the conversion of the Irish language machine, Irish language on the die, the date die. So here is the one we talked about earlier, the May 12th, 1922, which is the last known date for use of English name of Dublin on a canceling device. And it's the 5 bar. There was something here that was peeled off, probably a redirection of some kind. But it definitely is a 1922 cancel because the stamp was issued in February 1922. So the changeover from English to Irish, from Dublin to Blocklee, was done on May 12th, the night of May 12th, 13th. The earliest known use is the A machine on the left, which is known use on May 13th, 1922. And the B machine was not converted to the Irish language until July 17th, 1922. That's the story of the English language machine cancels at Dublin. So here is a number of recommended reading. I caution you that the Dibdin and Mann books are scarce, rare, difficult to acquire, impossible to acquire, because the Postal History Society that published 3 of the 4, and Dibdin, who published the 4th on his own, only printed 100 to 150 copies of each of those volumes. So they have disappeared over the years, and they are available in major libraries, such as the library at the Royal Philatelic Society of London, the American Philatelic Research Library, but trying to buy them on the open market is virtually impossible. The Manfred Schollmeyer early Irish stamp canceling machines until 1922 is still available. It was published in 2000, seemed to make missing a 0 there. And it is in German and in English. It is available from the FAI, and I will not impress upon you my fail German. I can't. The name of the society is pretty long, but the I stands for Irish. So if you're interested in Ireland, in Irish philately, and anything to do with Irish postal history, there are 4 societies, and probably more, that you might be interested in. The first one on the left is the Era Philatelic Association, the one that Rob said I was the president of at one point. The Irish Philatelic Circle. So the Era Philatelic Association is headquarters in the U.S. The Irish Philatelic Circle is headquartered in England. The Dublin Stamp Society is the local stamp society of Dublin in Ireland, and the FAI is a German organization studying and collecting of Irish material. With the exception of the Dublin Stamp Society, the other 3 have journals. The FAI journal is quite extensive. It's quarterly, and it has some very interesting articles. They do a lot of original research, and again, it's in German and English. And they also, at the moment, are the ones who publish books and pamphlets uh, on Irish, mainly postal history, postal stationaries, and canceling devices. They have a book on spoons. They have a book on numeral cancels. They have a catalog of Irish postal stationery, which is probably one of the most valuable items if you're into Irish postal stationery, because there is no other a handbook on the subject. So that's it for me.
Oh, that was fabulous. I'm going to start bringing people over. And if there's anyone who's a member of this society, I'd like you to also raise your hand so we could bring you over with some priority.
We've got some anonymous attendee questions here. Was the use of Esquire to denote lawyers, or was it a preferred notation for men?
Esquire is the lowest, absolutely lowest of the British aristocratic nomenclature. It was not it's not a title, it's not a hereditary title. It is used for lawyers these days, particularly. But it is used for people who are important in society that don't have a title. Depending on your job, depending on what you were doing. There is no specific reason for it, except that I guess some people wanted to be distinguished from the plebe.
Mm-hmm. Another question. What are non-English machines? Are there non-English language machines?
Well, that's what I call the Irish. Some of the Norwegian Krag machine is in Norwegian when it was used in Norway. There are some of those machines that were used in France, and they're in French. So I haven't really done a complete study of where those machines were used, but most of them were used in the US and in Canada and in England. But occasionally you find like the Krag machine was used in Germany, was used in Norway. And the universal machines but the word universal was used in many countries.
Okay. Why did they change the number of bars? Was it to differentiate the different dies?
No, the number of the bars were constant, except for the last machine, the universal machine, where the quality of the material used apparently made the dies break, and there was the change from I'm not quite sure why they changed from the straight lines to the wavy lines at one point, but there was a reason for doing that. The machines then, one of the things I didn't talk about is because there's none for Dublin, they had slogan cancels in them starting in the 1917, 16, 17, 18 period. And some of the rarest machine cancels in Ireland are from Cork and Belfast, which is by war bonds or something for the guns, and feed the guns. And so they were slogans that you could use for the Krag machines and for the Hay Dolphin machines. And those were used more extensively after 1922. So the Krag machines were used until 1953 in Ireland, but not in Dublin. So that's why they're not part of the study.
Okay, one last question before we open it up to the panelists. Why did they change the language?
It was part of their national, it was part of their national uh, nationalism. They they tried to reintroduce the Irish. Well, they succeeded in reintroducing the Irish language, and what best to do it with, but with things that people saw every day. Uh, the the numeral cancels, the canceling machines, the stamps, the coins, the money, the paper money. It was part of the Irish being Irish and wanting to be different from the British.
Mm-hmm. All right. Bob Vogel, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes. Hi, Charles. Thank you so
Hello,
much for
Bob.
that. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. You know that machine cancels are very near and dear to my heart as well.
I know.
From Canada, not Ireland, unfortunately. I've got a couple of questions though. That hill pivot machine. You didn't mention, was that hand operated or foot operated?
I'm sorry, what machine?
The hill pivot, the first one?
Oh, the person hill pivot, they were hand operated. They're
Okay.
not electric.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wondered because it looked like it was a tall one. It could have been foot operated too with a treadle.
No, they were
know.
just slapping them this way, up and down across the table. They would put all the letters side by side, and they would by
Cool.
swinging it, basically.
Yeah, thanks. And the next question, or my last question too, the Hey Dolphin, were they connected with the International Supply Company in New York? Because
The what?
the International Supply Company in New
Not
York,
that I know of. Not that I
okay,
know of.
because the hubs are very similar with a date on the bottom. I was just curious. And I know that name came up somewhere before, and I have to check my notes and call Dan Hunka. Dan will know. Thanks very much, Charles, again for that wonderful
You're
presentation.
welcome.
All right. Do we have any more questions?
Can you hear me? I think not.
Anthony
Yes.
Hughes. Anthony Hughes. Did I make any mistakes? You have to yeah.
I can give you a small piece of information on some of the machines. I have one cover that's dated earlier than one of yours. I will send it on to you. Send on a copy.
Thank
I don't know
you.
why you picked on me. But again, a marvelous presentation. Really enjoyed it, and without doubt,
Well, thanks for
groundbreaking stuff. Thank you very much.
thanks for attending.
You're more than welcome. I enjoyed it immensely.
All right. Anybody else have their hand up?
I have a
Michael Goodman.
Good. Mike Goodman, editor of Stamp Lover, Bournemouth, England. What interested me in this presentation was that I have a few covers. One's postmarked Dublin, May the 8th, 1922, and a similar one with a twopenny stamp on, Bailey Clearth in Gaelic, May the 16th.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether they're Hey Dolphins or Universals. Perhaps I could sort of email some photos of them.
Well, they're universal machines.
Yeah.
The Hey Dolphins were destroyed in the Rotunda fire.
They've got 5 lines, so
yeah.
But it was interesting you gave the date. I was very interested that you gave the transition date as May the 12th. So
yeah, my
pretty
earliest Gaelic or Irish language is May 16th as well. I have never found a May 13th, but it is well known that night from May 12th to 13th, that's when it changed. And I've seen pictures of May 13th, so they do exist. I just don't have one.
How long were these universal machines used with the Gaelic?
Well, I don't know how long they were used.
Up
But
to about 2000.
they were the English was transformed into Irish in Dublin on the first time, and all the other offices later on. They didn't all change over on May 13th. As you can see by the other machine in Dublin, it didn't change till July 17th.
Yes, thanks.
But how long they lived after, I don't know. I know the Crag machines lived until the 1853 period, the 1953 period, and were used, frequently in many post offices in Ireland.
Yes, thank you. Most interesting.
Thank you.
I
May
think
I come in then?
Stan
Stan,
Chalice.
Good evening. Yeah, I can't get my camera to work at the moment. Can you hear me?
I'm trying to.
Okay, I'll speak up a bit. Charles, on the Pearson Hill machines, I have recorded a number of uses in 1866, 67. I put 67, 68 in the question asked. I should have put 66, 67, where the town die has an X in it. And I believe those X's record an experimental Pearson Hill machine or machines that were used in Dublin. I've actually recorded, I don't know whether you've got hold of a copy of my book on the subject, Irish Diamonds. It's basically concerned with the numeral cancels. But there is some coming together of dates. Like I've got 24 and 25th of August, 66, one date in October, then the 22nd, 29 December, 66, two dates, 4th and 9th of January, etc. And I rather suspect they did little trials. It's shown always as an X. I've seen 8 or 9 dates altogether. Nobody else has ever recorded these. Bill Kane, when he was dealing with the Dublin duplexes, didn't record these. I wonder if you can comment at all.
I don't. On the Pearson Hill pivots, all I've ever seen is 1, 2, 3, and 21.
Yeah, these are pre-pivots.
Yes,
or possibly experimental pivots.
The spoons and many other canceling devices in Dublin had an X. They had numbers. They had an H that was either straight up or sideways. They had a moon. They had a sun, and the numbers were 1 to 8, and 1 to 8 introduced were the numbers of the sorting tables. The moon was when the post was canceled at midnight, and the sun was when the post was canceled at noon. The H, I don't know what it was for, and the X could have been experimental, but I don't know that either. And there are also other other indications that don't come to mind at the moment, but my Dublin postal history collection and exhibit is at least 30 years gone. So I don't have that kind of memory of what I did look at or study at the time, but I know that I was fascinated by the star and the moon and the H. Never found a reason for the H.
Okay, David Brennan's had his hand up for a while here. Go ahead, David.
No, that's all right. I think Charles pretty much covered everything. I just wanted to thank him and I think he did a paper one time on mermaids, and that would be interesting for him to share with us in the future.
I'll try.
Thanks, David. All right. Tony Ward, good to see you. Got a question?
Yes, thank you. Look, Charles, that was fascinating. It's lovely to see specialisation like this. And hopefully, now that this has been seen by so many people, they might just happen to find a few gems with an interesting date on it that might help expand the knowledge base for you.
That would be very useful, and it would certainly help Mr. Hoffmeyer as well, who I understand continues keeping track of the machine councils.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
So if anyone has examples, where should they send them? They could send them to us and we'll send them wherever, but
Well,
send them to Bob Vogel, huh?
You can send them to me, and my email address is commonly, I have no problem giving out my email address because it's all over the world. And it's C like Charles, and J like Joseph, and G like Gerald, and Verge, VERGE @rogers.com.
Well, if anyone missed that, you're welcome to email us, and we'll get you connected with Charles, so that way we'll get these examples. Patrick.
Yes, I have some covers that my grandmother passed on from Dublin from about 1907 to 1914. I'm hoping that your presentation will be available later so I can sort through these.
I understand it's been recorded.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
thank
We'll
you.
make it available. Now, if Patrick has any questions, Charles, should he go to one of the groups, or could he email you?
If he has questions about what I presented tonight, he's welcome to email me. If not, then he should go. If he speaks German, I would recommend he goes to the German group, because Offmeyer is probably I'm getting his name wrong, I'm sure. He's very knowledgeable on the subject.
Thank you very much.
Anthony.
What is interesting, the machines changed name in May, but the hand stamps continued in English for quite some time afterwards. So I was trying to find a letter I have here somewhere, and it was the machine missed the stamp, and the name is in Irish, but the stamp was cancelled in English. So the hand stamps actually continued in English for quite some time afterwards in Dublin.
I gather that the timing of translation from English to Irish was done when they needed to issue new hand stamps, simply because they didn't want to spend extra money necessarily, particularly for the smaller post offices. So yes, it was a very long period of time that they took to translate all of the.
May I come in there, Charles, please? It's Stan.
Yes,
Yeah.
Actually,
I can hear you. I can't. I don't know if I can see you. That's the other
Yeah,
issue.
I got my video working, but never matter for that. I can answer the question of Dublin very quickly on the hand stamps. They were still in English until the Rotunda fire, and then they produced a new series after that in, I think it was the very end of 22 or early 23. As regards the various provincial offices, it was a very long extended period, and there were still offices, rural offices, cancelling in English well into the 1950s. It's
Yes,
quite a fascinating subject.
It makes sense that they changed them after the Rotunda fire, because most of the hand stamps were
all
in
lost.
that, yeah, and yes, and you're right. They went even uh, in the early 70s, there was a couple of offices which I visited that had English hand stamps. So they weren't all converted till well later.
I collect Westmead, and it's a fascinating.
Hey, it's Anthony. Yes, Anthony.
It's actually a fascinating study to see when the hand stamps were transferred from English to Irish. You will often find that the offices that were using rubber hand stamps changed fairly quick because their lifespan was quite short. Kilbeggan is a very interesting study. It was initially issued with an Irish hand stamp very soon after 1922, but it must have broken or it was misplaced or lost because it reverted to the old English hand stamp, and it was used right up, I think, until 1950, nearly 1957. So it can be a fascinating study, particularly if you collect a county. Sorry.
The rubber hand stamps they have a short lifespan, so it's not surprising that they would have been converted rather quickly. And sometimes some of those rubber hand stamps were even produced in English for some unknown reason when they were for fairs or for like the Dublin Horse Show. They had a very short period of life, and the whole study of transfer from English to Irish is I don't think anybody has ever done it in a complete, because there's more than just the hand stamp and the machine cancels. There's all the other post office canceling devices for money orders, for internal work in the post office, for registration. Not in my lifetime will I ever be able to do that, but there is a lot of potential in studying Irish canceling devices.
Another interesting fact is that the names changed to Irish, but when they wanted to get the message across in the slogan, they used English because the people spoke English and English was the number one language. So the town name was in Irish, but the message was in English. That's, I find, interesting and curious.
The whole thing is that if you look at it even today, in many cases the town name is in Irish, but the date is in English.
When the original even that the hand stamps, or I would refer to as the circular date stamps, the date, the original date, if you look closely at the original date, used the month was in Roman numerals. So it had a 1, a 3, a 2, 3, a V, an I, V, a V6. So for a long time, the original numbers were in, rather than use English, they used Roman numerals. Now they eventually reverted to the English language. But initially, they used the Roman numerals for the months.
Yeah, most countries who are bilingual, like Ireland and Canada, use Roman numerals to solve the problem of bilingualism and a date stamp in a small space.
John Gilpin, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Charles, a very nice display. Thank you very much. Some very nice items there. I collect these machine cancels as well. A couple of things that I noticed as we went through. On the pivot cancels, the Dublin ones are known with 3 screw marks as well as 1 or 2. There's a 3rd screw mark to the left of the date die sometimes. The Columbia B machine in 1919, there's a theory that it replaced the Hay Dolphin bee machine for a couple of months, and we don't know the reason for that. But the dates seem to fit where you don't get the Hay Dolphin, but you do get the Columbia bee for a couple of months. And at the end of your display, you showed a universal mark as being, I think, one of the last days. I suggest that's actually a Hay Dolphin mark rather than a universal.
Really? Okay.
I think so.
I agree
But the
with
Hay
that.
Dolphin,
There you
but
are.
the Hay
Right.
Dolphin machines were destroyed.
Yes. So if you had a last day mark, it's the day before they were destroyed. Yes.
Okay. I'm always willing to learn.
Like
I
all of us,
think if
yes.
you
No
look at
no
the
one knows
Columbia
everything.
bee machine, which you mentioned, your date was something like 12:30 a.m. Of the ones I have, I think, only times rather, like, yeah, 12 a.m., 1 a.m. They're all in the middle of the night. So I rather suspect it was a special posting box for overnight mails or something like that. Where it was, I don't know. It may well have not been at the Rotunda because it was irregularly used. I have no more knowledge than that, but I think it's possibly worth investigating further, Charles.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I've renewed my interest in this subject, possibly because of Joan asking me to do something that was British Empire related. But I've extended it not only to Dublin, but I've extended it to all of Ireland prior to 1922. So I realized when I was putting this presentation together how much I am missing of the other areas, and how much, in fact, there is left to study on the subject.
I don't know whether anybody can see this on the screen. It's the book I've done on the Diamond Numeral Councils of Ireland. It was published by Roster Trust last year. I think they've sold out, but it's worth looking for if you're interested in the diamond numerals, and that obviously includes the Pearson Hill and Pivot machines of Dublin.
Oh,
Thanks for that reference, Stan. Anybody else have any questions?
so do we have any Irish historians on the call? Because there's a lot of history that I know I was missing. You know, I guess there's a lot of the backstory on why this was all happening.
Well, I can see a lot of my Irish colleagues here that are specialized in different things, like Carl Winkelman, who specializes in Irish censor material, and Anthony Hughes, who does Westmeath County, and Stan Chalice, who does postmarks of the counties of Ireland. And then the well-known and renowned Brian Warren, who keeps track of every new issue and every new canceling device and every new postal stationery and every new philatelic souvenir in Ireland, and has done so for eons, and publishes this information in the Irish the Ira Philatelic Association Journal, the Revealer, and publishes in the FAI. And it is the compendium of everything Irish issued in a year. And sometimes it covers more than one issue of the journal because there's so much information. Thank you very much, Bob.
Anthony.
Nicely put.
You asked about Irish history. The connection between, now in a lot of countries it's the same, but the connection between the post office, postmarks, and Ireland, particularly from 19, just prior to 1916, right up to the mid 1930s, is absolutely fascinating. It just, because what happened in Ireland very much reflected in both the postmarks, especially, and the stamps as well. So if anybody's interested in history, and particularly Irish history, you can really study Irish history from that period, from the early 1900s right up to almost the Second World War. Again, through postmarks and letters and things like that. As I said, we mentioned Carol Winkham, and there, I see him there. Every letter in and out of Ireland in the Second World War was censored. He's the expert on it. He's the real expert on it. But again, it reflects our neutrality in the Second World War. Ireland in 1916, there was almost two Irish armies. There was the Irish Army fighting for independence, and the amount of Irishmen that joined the British Army in 1914. Again, that's reflected in the field post office marks. So it's just Irish history, and the post office is absolutely fascinating. And I would only scratch the surface. I regard myself as sorry for
in my listing of people and their expertise, I forgot to mention my dear sister, Pat Walker, who's an expert on Irish postal history, pre-Victorian, and packbo mail, or ship mail, I guess. So, yeah. Sorry, Pat.
Hold on, we'll unmute you. Hold on. Okay. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Joan.
I didn't know you were that multifaceted. I was, that's fantastic. And you're related to Charles?
Charles and I are twins. We were born on the same day in the same year, like 6 hours apart, something like that.
Oh my God. You're not joshing me, are you? This is like
no,
truth?
We're not. I'm the eldest by 6 hours.
Oh my gosh. And you both got into philately. That's amazing.
And we both got into Irish postal history.
Yeah.
Different mother though, right?
Oh, yes.
That's another story.
That's another story for another time. Yes. So I first met Pat when I started doing Irish postal history, and found out that she was, doing that kind of thing. And that was many years ago, 30 years ago or something like that. So time has passed, and we've had lots of fun together, and did a lot of traveling, and been at different places together. And we signed the Roll of Distinguished Philatelists the same year. We didn't get elected the same year, but we signed it the same year, which was really, really nice.
Well, I hope people come out to the Liechtenstein this year, see you at the Liechtenstein dinner.
It's on my calendar.
It's on my calendar as well, but we'll see what happens to other things.
Uh-oh. So, wow, I see a lot of great people. Now, Glenn, you've been very quiet this meeting.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
My specialty of interest is New Zealand,
Yeah.
but recently retired, so I'm just starting to have the ability and time to join these conversations, even though I'm not contributing. But maybe one day I'll present New Zealand in a simplified form.
Oh no, that's wonderful. I think one of our early presentations was in New Zealand. All right, I forgot the fellow's name. He was a fantastic guy. He did.
One of the fantastic things about New Zealand cancellations, hand stamps and otherwise, particularly hand stamps, is many of them are written or have Maori names on them, and they are a font of material for stamp collectors and for particularly themатicists. So I collect dental thematic, and one of the Maori cancels I have has to do with the gum tree, which is what produces gutta percha And it's fascinating. I can't read Maori, but there are dictionaries and there are translations of postmarks, and there's all kinds of information around the world of our world of philately that can be useful if you have the ability with languages, or the ability to find somebody who does, or the ability to find a dictionary. Place name dictionaries are fascinating when it comes to thematics.
Absolutely. I lived in New Zealand until 1994 and then moved to the United States. One of my little fields of interest is Māori Tonga, so the indigenous culture. So yeah, I'm particularly interested in place names and, for example, one of the volcanoes on the North Island, on the west coast of the North Island, was named Mount Egmont, and Lord Egmont never visited New Zealand. And recently the name has reverted, thankfully, to its indigenous name, Mount Taranaki. So there's a growing awareness of Māori place names.
But that's not the only country who has interesting names. I mean, there are so many possibilities in every country in the world, including the Cayman Islands, which is hell. There's also hell in Norway if you're doing something diabolical. So there's fascinating areas of. And I know one of the things about collecting Ireland, the other thing that I've been to Ireland many times, and not recently, but many times, and it allowed me to start learning about how to pronounce things. And it's fascinating that you can say Blocklee, which is the Dublin acronym for Cliat, and that you can say Dunleary, that kind of thing. It's just fascinating to me, or Milfoilty. It's just, there are so many possibilities of learning and adding to our personal base of knowledge that then we can share with others. And it really is nice.
Anthony.
When you're talking of place names, you really want to look. I know I'm biased and I'm Ireland through and through, but you take, in my county, you have the name Delvin. Delvin is actually the Irish word for fire maker. And the story that goes with that is fascinating. There's another post office out the road called Drum Cree. The word drum means heart, and the word drum means hill, and the word Cree means heart. So the name actually means hill of size, hill of the heart. The legend and story that goes with that, I'm not going to bore you with it, is absolutely fascinating. In Ireland, most towns that start with the name Kilkenny, Kilcock usually means church. Drum means a hill, as I said. Luan, Balya Áha Clia means a ford. So, and a lot of them go back thousands of years. You take Slane, was a post office, it's just out the road. It's mentioned in the Tawn, which dates to around the time of Christ. The original story goes back to, we reckon, the time of Christ. So that will give you an idea of just Irish place names alone. It's a fascinating study, Irish place names. And some huge amount of academic research has been done on it. So if you want to study Irish, if you want to study place names and their meaning, take on Ireland.
Wow. And it's so neat how you could relate the history with the post, with all the philatelic material, whether it be a letter or the stamps or, the cancellation devices. That's one of the things that I absolutely love about philately.
Well, the London Philatelist, the latest issue, the London Philatelist, has an article by David Beach on context philately, which he is a proponent of exactly that, integrating philately with history and every other branch of collecting possible, and politics, whatever you want. He's pushing for the context of what we collect and the subjects that we want to show are basically their context, and how they came about is important.
David's a great guy. I like David Beach.
Yeah.
So, Jason, you're quiet there in the corner. I could unmute you. I did that.
Oh dear.
Yeah, now you're in trouble.
Well, careful what you wish for, because I do love an open mic.
Well, you're lucky Brian has his hand up, so he's gonna take it away.
Thanks for your kind comments, Charles, and very well done on your presentation.
Thank you.
The only thing I can add, just to, it mightn't have come true, but Irish is still used to the present day on all both machine cancels and post office counter cancels. So, you know, it's a collecting interest to this day. Although, for a period, and Anthony probably can give me the exact dates, it was in the 1990s when they changed over to self-inking hand stamps at post office counters. Somebody boobed, and for the first 7 or 8 ones that they issued, they issued them in English rather than Irish. And of course, this created a great hoo-ha, and they were withdrawn, and Irish ones came out instead. So those particular cancels, which were only around for a few months, that were in English rather than Irish, are quite scarce to this day. That's the only thing I can add to the story of Irish English in the period since 1922.
John, you have your hand up. Oh, you have to unmute. We're gonna do this. Oh, hold on. Okay, try it now.
Okay, I was
yeah.
very interested in a remark that someone made a few moments ago about official documents. Now, in Wales, every official document has to be written in Welsh and in English. And I'm wondering if it's the same thing in Ireland.
That's not, there's no easy answer to that. Any government body or semi-government body that issues an annual report here in Ireland has to produce it in Irish. Again, Anthony, you might be able to clear, but there are certain documents have to be available both Irish and English, but when you're filling out forms for government purposes mainly, but I don't think that there's no overall general rule about it.
And all official documents, government documents, have to be, like Wales, have to be produced in both Irish and English. Our constitution is written in Irish and English, and the Irish version technically takes precedence. The EU negotiations, when they were going on back in the early 70s, and all our treaties, international treaties, are written in Irish and English. And again, I believe the Irish version takes precedence. Technically, it's supposed to be the same. It's supposed to be the same translation. But the Irish version can take And if someone goes to court in this country, they can demand and are entitled to have their case heard through Irish. So even though English is the majority language, and unfortunately my Irish is not what I would like it to be, it's far from it. I do have a daughter though who is very fluent in Irish, and a friend, I won't say what a friend of mine calls her, but Irish is an absolutely fascinating language, but unfortunately I'm not good enough at translating, or not really that good. And the odd time I get people asking me stuff about Irish, I pass it on to her and she comes back with it like that. But the Irish language does take precedence. And every official document and government document has to be printed in Irish. And same in county councils. We have a person here in the local county council who specialises in translating documents into Irish, even though there'll be no native speakers in Westmeath except those that have come from Connemara or Wales. That's all I can tell you.
Actually, but back in the early 1970s, all road signs and place step signs in Wales had to be bilingual. So you have to have a town sign in the Welsh language or the English language.
They have always been bilingual in Ireland. It's rare to see, even on the motorways to this day, you would see the road signs in bilingual Irish and English. But they're always bilingual in Ireland, even going back to, I'd say, the foundation of the state.
Yeah, the rules in Canada are very similar to the ones in Ireland about language. But think of the poor people in Switzerland who have to do it in 4 languages.
Oh my gosh. Robert Bendinghoff, I'm not sure if you'd like to talk, just chime in. I see your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Robert.
How you doing, Charles?
I'm
So
fine,
I don't know
thank
what's
you.
with having some computer problems tonight, trying to bounce between a laptop and a desktop. But Irish history of the early 20th century has been an area of interest of mine for about 70 years, it seems, at least since secondary school in Ireland. One of the interesting things about 1922 was J.J. Walsh was appointed Postmaster. It was also the unofficial Irish cultural ambassador. He took on the role and promoted Irish language and culture at a rapid pace. And one of the first things he wanted to promote when he got control of the Irish post office on April 1st, there was a lag between independence and the end of the British post office fiscal year, March 31st. And the Irish assumed control of the post office on April 1st. And he won gangbusters to get the town councils in Gaelic. All you had to do was apply to him from whatever town or village that you were in, your town council, whatever, and he would have town councils created and sent out to you as soon as possible. He also was promoting the Irish Olympics, Irish Sports Olympics in August of that year, which you'll see in a lot of the councils going after April. It was canceled due to the Civil War, but you can thank the rapid increase in Irish town councils in Gaelic to J.J. Walsh. Very good presentation, Charles. Found it fascinating.
You're welcome, Bob.
Thank you for the information, Bob. That's really interesting. As you can tell, I know nothing about Irish philately. Don't just
Well,
nod your head and say
we do have a
obviously.
Skype group meeting on Friday evenings in Ireland and afternoons in the US. Carl Winkelman is our host. It's been going on for 3 years. We talk for about 2 hours on Irish philately, and it's Skype, which allows us to bring up material in advance and present it to the audience. There's about 10 of us. But it's on every Friday at 3 East Coast time, 8 o'clock Irish time, 9 o'clock European time. If anyone is at all interested, I'll let Carl explain how you join. But basically, you need to upload Skype. It's the first thing. And after that, you search for Irish Philately, and we'll be glad to have you. We present all kinds of information on all topics from stamps to postal history to recent sporting events.
Well, if anyone's interested, just Carl, I understand you can't talk. You could just send us an email and we'll forward it on to one of you to Carl, I guess. We'll forward it on. And he'll get in touch.
I'm Michael.
Is there for a second?
That's fine.
Okay.
All my Canadian friends.
Yeah. I see Garfield. Hi, Garfield. And Mike. Okay. Is there anything else for Charles, or are we going to let him get back to dinner? No, you're not. Did you eat yet? No.
Nope. I don't eat that early.
No.
Nor
It's
this
almost
late, but that's fine.
well.
Charles, isn't it time
Anyway,
for
I'm grateful to all my Irish friends who are here, and the British like Stan, Channel Islands, and my Canadian friends as well. And I'm grateful to the Irish guys who have added to the conversation and made it so much better.
Dan, just chime in.
Yes. If anybody cares to email me, I'm very happy to send them the link to the Friday evening chats. It's 8 o'clock UK time, 9 o'clock European time, and I think that's 3 o'clock as was suggested, East Coast US and presumably East Coast Canada time, and some earlier hour in California. My email, if anybody cares to copy it down, is Stan, STAN, at Ross Kelly, which is ROSKELLY, only one S, ROSKELLY.co.uk, and I will happily send them the contact detail. I can't find it at the moment. I know it's somewhere in my computer.
Okay. I just put it in the chat so that way, when we send out the reminders for some of the people who had to leave early because it's pretty late in the UK and other places, they'll be able to get that information.
Surely.
Yeah.
I should say, Joan, it's perfectly nice and normal time here. Wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I know a lot of the Europeans, you see them and they're some of them. I'm wondering if they have their pajamas on really underneath the shirt that they threw on because it's so the rest of the house is dark but it's wonderful. And Duncan hasn't said anything. Gosh.
Duncan only speaks on subjects he knows something about.
No Irish philately. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Well, join this Skype meeting tomorrow and we'll give you a full indoctrination. No extra cost.
Yeah.
We
And
have-
December is such a hard month with all the, with Christmas and all the holidays. So it's, I'm really glad everyone could join.
I see
And Charles,
Carl has just put the link into the chat for the Skype Friday meetings.
oh, great. Now, is that something I could send out in the post-meeting reminder for people who want to join?
Yep,
Okay.
Yes.
no problem, I'm sure.
It's Ken Snelson here. I've been quiet too, like Duncan, because I'm not very big on Irish philately. But one of my collecting areas is the return letter offices of the UK to up until, and it covers Dublin and Cork and Belfast up until 1922. And there are very few return letter office envelopes and other ephemera from the Irish return letter offices available prior to that date. And if anybody's got anything much in that area, I'd be very pleased to see it.
I think you stumped them. They're all quiet.
Dan Chalice here again. If you
I know that
I've
Pat
certainly got
Walker has.
something. I was going to say I've certainly got something from the return letter office at Queenstown, which I can no doubt find for you. If you care to let me have your email address.
I'm the same. I got into a local solicitor's office recently, and a lot from the early 1900s. And again, I have a few returned letter envelopes and return letters. So I will endeavour to get them to you, but don't hold your breath.
Thanks very much.
I know that Pat Walker has one because I gave it to her when I disposed of my Irish postal history.
You gave it to her and not to me?
Yes.
That's special. That's special treatment.
Well, Ken, do you collect Irish postal history? No, she does. And at the time, I didn't know that you did return letter office. Now that I know, and now I see your book, now I know.
After the book was published, the Irish Postal Museum wrote to us and said, could we send them what we had because they hadn't got anything on the return letter office in Ireland.
Oh.
We see a lot of the information, a lot of the archives were destroyed either at the Rising in the post office or in the Civil War later on.
The Irish had a nasty habit of destroying secure buildings that housed their historical records, post office records in the GPO, then the customs office, big secure building in the War of Independence. And of course, the big crime was the forecourts for a lot of historical, going back to the Norman invasion, was destroyed during the Civil War. So
yeah, and the forecourts were also the holding of many of the genealogical information for Ireland.
Going back to the Norman invasion.
There's been a couple of major. Number one, there was very little postal history destroyed in the GPO. And the GPO had just been reopened a few months. There was a major renovation after taking a couple of years. And most of the records had been transferred to the Customs House. That was destroyed during the War of Independence. What was left was removed to the forecourts. That was destroyed in the Civil War. But this is a misdemeanor, the major destruction of early Irish records in 1660, a lot of the land had transferred, ownership of the land had transferred. When the crown was reinstated in 1660, there was a huge destruction of records by people who had gotten land during the Cromwellian settlement. So a lot of people don't realize how much was destroyed in 1660. Again, Irish post office records were destroyed in the early 1800s. Irish post office was independent from 1784 to 1831, and it was controlled by a father, first by John Lees and later by his son Edward Lees. To put it mildly, as crooked as a ram's horn is not quite what they were. They were worse than that. But again, they destroyed all records. Every year they destroyed all records because it was very much run as a family business. Now, luckily enough, there was a few parliamentary inquiries into the Irish Post Office. One in the early 1800s, I think it was 1812 or 1813. Another one in the early 1880s, which is very hard to find because it's part of an overall inquest into Ireland. But the major one was in 1829. The amount of information that's on those three parliamentary reports is fascinating. But first-hand information on the Irish Post Office from 1784 to 1931 is very hard got. You have to come at it sideways. You have to see what other people have to say. And again, you have to be careful of what they say. And O'Neill gentleman wrote a great comment on the post office in the early 1800s. And it's fascinating reading. But you must remember, he was fired. He was fired from the post office. So it's a bit one side. You just have to be careful. Again, Irish history. I done my PhD in the post office in Ireland, and you had to come at it sideways, completely sideways, to get information on it. You had to get it from outside information, outside letters, or comments people passed on the post office. Fascinating. It's fascinating study, though. Fascinating. I barely scraped the surface. Absolutely fascinating stuff. If anybody wants to do original stuff, find original stuff, you have to go really sideways to get it. You can come from a sideways angle. But they were the major destructions of Irish history. 1660, when what had basically, sorry if I'm going on, what had basically happened, a lot of people had gotten land, a lot of Cromwellian soldiers and people had gotten land in Cromwellian times. When the crown was reinstated, when Charles II came to the throne in 1660, a lot of the people who had been granted land in Ireland destroyed as many records as they could, try and hold on to the land they had been granted, and they were very successful in that. So a lot of Irish history was destroyed then. A lot of people think it disappeared in the Four Courts. A huge amount did disappear in the Four Courts. 1660 was almost as devastating as the Four Courts. Sorry if I'm going on. I'm onto a hobby horse now.
Well, Anthony just proved a point where that you have to think outside the box. And so when the post office was returned to English control in 1831, you have to remind yourself that you have to look at the records in London, because you will find all kinds of information there that are related to Ireland or related to Scotland, which are no longer available in those two countries. It's the same thing with, just it's not Irish and it's really aside, but you really have to think out of the box when you're studying something. Like I have an exhibit on the 1959 American dental stamp, and you have to think, okay, well, you're going to do a first day cover exhibit. You're not only going to do the cachets, you want to understand the whole production of the stamp. Well, you need to go to the Postal Museum in Washington, where they have the Third Assistant Postal Master's general files, and you can find all kinds of information in that. How many first day covers were made, how many configured 1 stamp, 2 stamp, 3 stamps, 4 stamps, etc. How much they paid for their clerks to do the first day covers. But there's also the BEP who produced the stamps, and they have records there. But more importantly, to think out of the box is you have to, and the U.S. Post Office has records. What about the American Dental Association? I called them one day. They're in Chicago. They have an archive. They have an archivist, and they have a full filing cabinet on that stamp. Original materials, original discussions with the post office, original correspondence, original drawings of people. They even have the canceling devices that the post office produced for the first day. They were given to the American Dental Association. So you really have to think out of the box when you're doing research.
Yeah, that's really strange. The American Dental Association.
Yeah. But
Okay.
it applies to any stamp that has been issued for, or it should apply to any stamp that's been issued for an organization, fraternity, a university. There has to be discussions between the post office and that particular institution. And that institution, if they're, half decent, will keep that material and keep it in their archives, because issuing a stamp for somebody or issuing a stamp for an organization is very, very important to them.
That's a pretty good thought.
I digress, but hey,
That's okay.
I tend to pontificate about research.
Oh, well, you're fabulous.
And how important it is in putting together an exhibit or a collection or any subject, writing a book, an organization, fraternity, a university. There has to be discussions between the post office and that particular institution. And that institution, if they're, half decent, will keep that material and keep it in their archives, because issuing a stamp for somebody or issuing a stamp for an organization is very, very important to them.
Oh, well, you're fabulous.
And how important it is in putting together an exhibit or a collection or any subject, writing a book.
Okay, is there anything else for Charles?
No, but Charles would like to call it quits.
I know yeah,
yeah, thanks, Duncan.
Yeah. Look at that.
One of the Irish.
Mine is empty. I have to go refill it.
One of the Irish surgeons.
Oh, Jameson, yes, Garfield. Next time.
Next time you may be too late. It may be canceled.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. It was really, really fantastic.
Yep.
I mean,
Thank you.